The knock on the door was loud in the quiet of my apartment. I set my book aside, heart racing as I stood. It had been years since I'd last seen Ryan, years since he moved to another state and our lives drifted apart. Yet, as I opened the door and saw him standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, it was as though no time had passed. "Ethan," he said, grinning that familiar grin that hadn't changed since we were kids. "Ryan." I laughed, pulling him into a quick hug. "Long time. No see." The hug lingered a second longer than expected, his warmth and the faint scent of his cologne enveloping me. When we pulled back, he looked around the apartment, nodding appreciatively. "Nice place," he said, dropping his bag by the couch. "Definitely better than the dorms we used to crash in." "Yeah, well, adulthood has its perks," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. We spent the evening catching up over takeout, the conversation flowing as easily as it always had. He told me about his job, his recent breakup, the road trip that had brought him here. I told him about my work, my uneventful dating life, and the projects that kept me busy. It felt good, natural, like slipping into a favorite shirt that still fit just right. But beneath the laughter and nostalgia, there was a tension I couldn't quite name. It was in the way his eyes lingered on mine when I spoke, the way his hand brushed against mine when he reached for his drink. I told myself I was imagining things, reading too much into gestures that meant nothing. And yet, the knot in my chest tightened every time he looked at me. As the night wore on, the apartment grew quieter, the city's hum filtering through the windows. Ryan leaned back on the couch, his arms stretched across the backrest, his eyes fixed on me. "You haven't changed much, you know," he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, his grin softening into something more thoughtful. "Just, you're still you. Still the same guy who used to help me cheat on math homework and sneak out to the lake after dark." "Someone had to keep you out of trouble," I replied, my voice quieter now. He laughed, the sound low and warm. "You didn't do a very good job of it." The silence that followed was heavier than before, the space between us charged with something unspoken. I felt his gaze on me, steady and searching, and for a moment I wondered if he could hear the frantic beat of my heart. "I miss this," he said softly. "Missed you." The words hit me harder than I expected, and I forced a small smile, trying to ignore the heat rising to my face. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." The words lingered between us, quiet but heavy. I didn't know how to respond, didn't trust my voice enough to try. Ryan's gaze held mine, steady and unreadable, and for a moment it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My heart raced, my chest tight, but I couldn't look away. Ryan shifted slightly, his arm brushing against mine where we sat on the couch. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. He smiled then, soft and easy, but there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch, something I didn't dare name. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I said quickly, too quickly. "Just tired, I guess." He tilted his head, studying me for a moment. "You've always been a terrible liar, you know that." I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the weight of the moment. "Guess some things never change." Ryan didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth twitched, like he was holding back a smile. The silence stretched again, thick and charged, until finally he stood, stretching his arms above his head. "I should probably crash," he said, his tone casual. "It's been a long drive." "Yeah, of course," I said, grateful for the break in tension. "I set up the guest room for you. Should be all set." "Thanks," he said, grabbing his bag from the floor. But as he turned toward the hallway, he hesitated, glancing back at me. "You sure you're okay?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. He'd always been able to read me better than anyone, even when we were kids. It was equal parts comforting and terrifying. "I'm fine," I said finally, my voice steadier now. "Really?" He nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. Good night, Ethan. Good night, I said, watching as he disappeared down the hall. I didn't go to bed right away. Instead, I stayed on the couch, staring at the empty space where Ryan had just been. My thoughts were a tangled mess, a constant loop of what-ifs and maybes that refused to quiet down. I told myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into a few lingering looks and casual touches. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something between us had shifted. It was late, well past midnight, when I finally dragged myself to my room. I was too restless to sleep, my thoughts still racing as I lay in the dark, staring up at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, the faint hum of the city outside the only sound. But then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it, a soft knock at my door. I sat up, my heart pounding. Yeah. The door creaked open, and Ryan stepped inside, his silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of the hallway light. He hesitated in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Ryan," I asked, my voice quieter now, "is everything okay?" "I couldn't sleep," he said, his tone soft. "Mind if I hang out here for a bit?" I nodded, scooting over to make room on the bed. "Yeah, sure." He crossed the room slowly, his movements almost hesitant, and sat down beside me. The bed dipped under his weight, the warmth of his body close enough to feel. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence thick and heavy. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, steady but shallow, and it matched the rapid rhythm of my own. "This feels familiar," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does?" He smiled faintly, his gaze distant. "Us. Sitting like this, talking about nothing. Feels like when we were kids." "Yeah," I said softly. "It does." He turned to look at me then, his expression more serious. "You ever think about those days?" "All the time," I admitted, my chest tightening. "Some of the best memories I have." His smile softened, and for a moment he didn't say anything. Then, quietly, he asked, "Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had been different?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at him, my mind scrambling for an answer, but I didn't know what to say. I'd spent years pushing those thoughts aside, convincing myself they didn't matter. But now, with him sitting here, so close I could feel the heat of his skin, they were impossible to ignore. "Ryan," I started, my voice trembling. "What are you saying?" He looked down, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. About you." My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. "Ryan, I know this is crazy," he said quickly, cutting me off. "And I know it's probably the worst timing in the world. But I can't stop thinking about what we could have been, what we might still be." His words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. I stared at him, my mind racing, my chest tight with a mix of fear and longing. I wanted to say something, to tell him that I'd thought the same thing, but the words wouldn't come. Ryan shifted closer, his hand brushing lightly against mine. The touch was soft, tentative, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. His gaze met mine, steady and searching, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the quiet hope that he was too afraid to name. "Tell me to stop," he said softly, his voice trembling. "If this isn't what you want, just say the word." I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I closed the gap between us, my lips meeting his in a kiss that was soft at first, then deepened as months, years, of unspoken feelings spilled over. His hands cupped my face, his touch both gentle and firm, and I felt myself melting into him, the weight of everything else fading away. The kiss was everything I hadn't let myself imagine. Warm and electric, overwhelming and grounding all at once. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting together, I let out a shaky breath, my heart racing. "This changes everything," I whispered. "I know," he said, his thumb brushing lightly against my cheek. "But I don't care. I've wanted this for so long, Ethan. I can't pretend anymore. Neither could I. Not after this. Not after him. We stayed there, our foreheads pressed together, the quiet of the room wrapping around us like a cocoon. My heart pounded in my chest, and I was sure he could hear it, but for once, I didn't care. Ryan's thumb traced lazy circles against my cheek, his touch grounding me even as my mind raced. "This feels unreal," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Does it?" Ryan asked, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Because it feels more real to me than anything else has in a long time." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. Instead, I leaned into his touch, letting the warmth of his hand settle me. My walls were crumbling, the carefully constructed barriers I'd built over years of denial and self-preservation falling away piece by piece. And Ryan was here, patient and steady, waiting for me to let him in. "Talk to me," he said softly. "Tell me what you're thinking." I hesitated, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, but his eyes were so open, so unguarded, that I couldn't bring myself to lie. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared of what this means, of what happens next." Ryan nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. "Me too," he said quietly, "but I'm more scared of losing this, of losing you." The weight of his words hit me hard, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I'd spent so long convincing myself that this, us, was impossible, that whatever I felt for Ryan was something to be buried and ignored. But now, with him sitting here, his hand on my face and his heart in his eyes, I couldn't keep pretending. "I don't want to lose you either," I said finally, my voice trembling. "But I don't know how to do this." "We figure it out," Ryan said simply. "One step at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just us." "Just us," I repeated, the words like a balm against my fear. He smiled then, his thumb brushing against my bottom lip. "That's all I've ever wanted." Before I could respond, he leaned in again, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was slower this time, more deliberate. His hands slid to the back of my neck, his fingers threading through my hair as he pulled me closer. I felt my hands settle on his chest, the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath my palms grounding me. The kiss deepened, and with it came a wave of emotion so intense I thought I might drown in them. Longing, relief, fear, hope, all of it tangled together in a way that felt overwhelming and perfect all at once. His hands moved to my waist, his touch firm but careful, as if he was afraid I might break. When we finally pulled apart, our breathing was uneven, our foreheads resting together once more. I felt his fingers trace the curve of my jaw, his touch soft and reverent. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, I never thought this would happen." "Neither did I," he admitted, his lips curving into a small, almost shy smile. "But now that it has, I don't think I can let it go." His honesty was almost too much, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "We take it slow," he said, his tone gentle. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight." I nodded, the tension in my chest easing slightly. "Okay." Ryan smiled, his hands still resting lightly on my waist. "Okay." We stayed there for a while longer, the quiet between us no longer heavy but comforting. When Ryan finally stood, his fingers lingered on mine for a moment before he stepped back. "I should probably let you get some sleep," he said, his voice soft. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure I'd be able to sleep after everything that had happened. He hesitated in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Ryan." The door clicked shut behind him, and I sank back onto the bed, my heart still racing. The weight of the night settled over me, but for the first time, it didn't feel unbearable. It felt right. Scary and uncertain, yes, but right. The next morning, the apartment was quiet when I woke. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft, golden light across the room. I lay there for a moment, letting the events of the previous night wash over me. It still felt surreal, like a dream I wasn't sure I'd actually had. I found Ryan in the kitchen, a mug of coffee in hand as he leaned against the counter. He looked up when I entered, his lips curving into a soft smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. The silence that followed was comfortable, the tension from last night replaced with something quieter, more settled. As we sat at the table, talking about everything and nothing, I realized how much had changed between us in such a short time. There was an ease to our conversation, a warmth that hadn't been there before, and yet, beneath it all, there was still that quiet undercurrent of something more, something we hadn't fully explored. When Ryan left later that afternoon, his goodbye lingered longer than usual. His hand brushed against mine, his eyes holding mine with a quiet intensity that made my chest ache. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. "You too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As I watched him walk away, a mix of emotions swirled in my chest. Hope, fear, longing, and something that felt a lot like love. I didn't know what the future held for us, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out.